Let's dive straight into news of the hours, and we begin with Trump announces 4 executive orders, including Iron Dome. Trump dismisses federal prosecutors probing his conduct. Switzerland report deport Palestinian American journalist Abu Nima. HRW says pregnant women, babies in Gaza face grave risks, and Afghan food crisis worsens as aid cuts limit meals. Stay with me for these more stories. We begin with the United States. Donald Trump, United States President, has announced he will sign an executive order seeking for the construction of an Iron Dome missile defense program. Trump's addressed a retreat for Republican lawmakers on Monday at his South Florida Gulf resort, the Trump National Doral, Miami, where he promised to boost U.S. military assets with executive action later in the evening. The first, he explained, was to immediately begin the construction of a state-of-the-art Iron Dome missile defense shield, which will be able to protect Americans. 2 more orders, he added, will be targeted at removing diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives and getting transgender ideology the hell out of our military. A fourth order will also reinstate service members who were discharged for refusing to comply with mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. Roughly 8,000 members had been discharged for that reason between August 2021 to January 2023. Trump framed the actions as essential to ensure the U.S. has the most lethal fighting force in the world. Monday's announcement marked yet another ripple in a tsunami of executive actions Trump has undertaken since returning to the White House on January 20th. Trump signed a record number of executive actions on his first day in office, amounting to a total of 42 orders, memorandums, and proclamations, according to officials. Several of those initial orders pertain to immigration and social issues. For instance, he made a measure to end birthright citizenship, a constitutionally protected right that endows anyone born in the U.S. with citizenship. But some of his early executive orders overlapped with those unveiled on Monday. He called for the end of government DEI programs, which he accused of perpetrating illegal and immoral discrimination, and he signed another order declaring that male and female gender identities are not changeable. But the newest raft of orders deals directly with the makeup of the U.S. military and its strategic priority. Still sticking with the United States, the administration of United States President Donald Trump has fired over a dozen prosecutors connected to the probe and prosecution of the Republican leader while he was out of office. According to anonymous sources within Trump's government, Monday's terminations were effective immediately and applied to employees in the Department of Justice. An official said, according to reports, that acting Attorney General James McHenry, a Trump appointee, had determined that the prosecutors could not be trusted to faithfully implement the president's agenda because of their significant role in prosecuting the president. The step highlighted Trump's threat to seek retribution against those who scrutinize his behavior, and it marked a break with long-standing norms that career government employees should not be punished for carrying out tasks under a preceding administration. On January 20th, Trump took office for a second term as President of the United States after serving earlier from 2017 to 2021. Those affected by Monday's firings included prosecutors who had worked with former special counsel Jack Smith, who led 2 investigations into Trump before stepping down. One focused on Trump's retention of hundreds of classified documents at his private residence despite a subpoena in 2022 for their return. The other zeroed in on his behavior before, during, and after the 2020 presidential election, which he lost to Democrat Joe Biden. Trump was accused of seeking to subvert the election results, which he falsely claimed were marked by extensive voter fraud. Both probes resulted in federal criminal indictments, the first in Florida, the second in Washington, D.C. Trump was the first U.S. president, past or present, to face criminal charges. In addition to the federal cases, he was also charged in 2 state-level indictments. Away from the United States and now to Israel-Gaza conflict, Ali Abu Nima, Palestinian-American journalist, has confirmed that Swiss authorities have released and deported him after holding him for 3 days. Abu Nima, the executive director of the Electronic Intifada publication, suggested in a social media post on Monday that Switzerland arrested him because of his advocacy for Palestinian rights. My crime is being a journalist who speaks up for the Palestine and against Israel's genocide and settler colonial savagery and those who aid and abet it, he wrote. On Saturday, Abunima was apprehended in Zurich before he was set to deliver a speech in the city, stoking outrage from Palestinian rights advocates. Report on Sunday said the Swiss police cited an entry ban and other measures under the country's immigration law as the reason for Abunima's arrest. The Palestinian American journalist said when he was queried by police officers, they accused him of offending against Swiss law without providing specific charges. He said he was cut off from communication with the outside world in a cell 24 hours a day, adding that he was unable to contact his family. He added that he was only given back his phone at the gates of the plane that flew him to Istanbul. Abunima noted that during the period when he was taken to prison like a dangerous criminal, Switzerland welcomed Israeli President Isaac Herzog to the World Economic Forum in Davos. Herzog has triggered controversy for his stance on Israel's war in Gaza, which has killed over 47,000 Palestinians. He earlier said there are no uninvolved civilians in Gaza. United Nations experts had criticized Abunima's detention as an assault on free speech. Irene Khan, a United Nations Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Opinion and Expression, described Abunima's arrest as shocking news on Saturday and urged his release. Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, also called for a probe into the incident. Abunima's detention came amid a surge clampdown on pro-Palestine voices in Europe amid the war in Gaza, which United Nations experts have compared with genocide. In Gaza, Israel has killed 205 journalists since the beginning of the war in October 2023, according to local authorities. Still in Israel and Gaza war, in a latest report, Human Rights Watch HRW has said Israel's 15-month war on Gaza, as well as extreme restrictions it enforced on the flow of humanitarian support and Israeli forces' attacks on health facilities and aiming of healthcare workers have led to life-threatening danger for pregnant women and babies. In spite of the ongoing ceasefire, the risky conditions under which women in Gaza are given birth are unlikely to advance, the group noted in the report published on Tuesday, as Israeli legislation aiming the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, United Nations RWA, and taking effect this week is likely to severely limit the delivery of humanitarian relief to the devastated territory. The group found that women in Gaza have been rushed out of the overcrowded hospitals, sometimes within hours of giving birth, in order to make room for war casualties. Newborn care has also been extremely affected, with one doctor at Helal Al-Marati Maternity Hospital in Rafah saying that the facility had so few incubators and so many preterm babies that doctors there were forced to put 4 or 5 babies in one incubator. Many babies have died from the lack of shelter amid freezing temperatures. HRW concluded in the 56-page report that Israel, as the occupying power in Gaza, has violated the rights of pregnant women and girls, including the right to dignified care in pregnancy, childbirth, and the postpartum period, as well as the right to newborn care. The group also emphasized that 2 pieces of legislation passed by the Israeli Knesset last year and taking effect on Tuesday threatened to further exacerbate the harm to maternal and newborn health. The bills, which bar United Nations RWA from operating in Israel and occupied East Jerusalem and the Israeli government from contact with the agency, effectively make it difficult for United Nations RWA to get permits for itself and to deliver much needed support to Gaza. Belkis Will, HRW's Associate Crisis Conflict and Arms Director, said, according to a report, that despite the fact that the ceasefire could provide an opportunity for the healthcare system in Gaza to begin to be restored because of the laws coming into effect barring the operations of United Nations RWA, The reality is that these coming weeks may lead to pregnant women and newborns suffering even more than they already have. According to a report, as of this month, emergency obstetric and newborn care is only available at 7 out of 18 partially functioning hospitals across Gaza, 4 out of 11 field hospitals, and 1 community health center. All medical facilities operating in Gaza face unsanitary and overcrowded conditions and serious shortages of essential healthcare supplies, including medicine and vaccines. And medical workers, hungry, overworked, and at times under military attack, are scrambling to tend to victims of attacks while also addressing countless cases of waterborne and other communicable disease. The report adds. Israel's war has led to an unprecedented displacement of almost 90% of Gaza's residents, several of whom were displaced multiple times. That has made it hard for pregnant women to safely access health services, the report found, noting that mothers and newborns have had almost no access to postnatal care. Away from Israel and Gaza conflict in Afghanistan, the head of the World Food Program says the agency can only feed half the millions of Afghans in need after cuts in international assistance and impending freeze in U.S. foreign funding. Several people were living on just bread and tea, WFP Country Director Hassai Waili said according to a report. In 2021, Afghanistan was tipped to the brink of economic crunch as the Taliban took over and all development and security aid to the country was stopped, with restrictions also placed on the banking sector. Since then, humanitarian aid targeted at funding urgent needs through non-profit organizations and bypassing government control has filled some of the gap. But donors have been cutting steadily in recent years, concerned by Taliban restrictions on women, including their order that Afghan female NGO employees stop work and compete in global crunch. Lee said shortly before finishing her 3-year term in Afghanistan that funding cuts had meant that nearly half the 15 million Afghanistans in acute need of food were not receiving rations during this year's harsh winter. According to United Nations data, Afghanistan's humanitarian plan was only just over half funded in 2024, and aid officials have flagged fears that could fall further this year. On Friday, the U.S. State Department issued a stop work order for all existing foreign aid and halted new assistance, according to reports after President Donald Trump ordered a suspension to review if aid allocation was aligned with his foreign policy. It was not immediately clear how that would affect Afghanistan's humanitarian operations, which in 2024 were more than 40% funded by the United States, the biggest donor. Western diplomats and humanitarian officials have said aid is dropping to Afghanistan in part due to international emergencies in Sudan, Ukraine, and Gaza, and also because of concerns with Taliban restrictions on women. The International Criminal Court prosecutor last week announced he had applied for arrest warrants for 2 Taliban leaders, including Supreme Spiritual Leader Hibatullah Akhundzada, accusing them of the persecution of women and girls. Moving now to more stories, and in Africa, Kenyan president says diplomacy key to resolving DRC conflict. On Monday, Kenya's President William Ruto described the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo DRC as very complicated and said it could only be solved diplomatically. His comments came as Rwanda-backed M23 rebels claimed to have captured Congo's biggest city, Goma, as fighting intensified despite calls from the United Nations Security Council for the insurgents to withdraw. Overnight, gunshots rang out across Goma before dozens of rebels in military uniform early on Monday morning marched into the capital of North Kivu province, which sits on the border with Rwanda. The volatile region is rich in minerals that are vital to much of the world's technology. Kinshasa said the rebel advance resulted to a declaration of war. Amid the rising conflict, Ruto, who is also chairman of the East African Community, said he has called an emergency meeting for member states on Wednesday. He said Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi were due to attend the meeting. Late on Saturday, Congo broke off ties with Rwanda, which has denied supporting the M23 despite evidence collected by United Nations experts and others. The Eastern DRC has been in tinderbox for decades, and the United Nations has cautioned that this newest M23 offensive risks spiraling into a regional war. Let's take a breather now. When we come back, I'll bring you stories from Nigeria. Do stay with us. Welcome back, and it's still global news on Zuma Nigeria. Now we begin with stories from Nigeria. We begin with report says 13 million more Nigerians face poverty risks this year. According to a report by PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC International Limited, increasing inflation, intensifying interest rates, and the depreciating value of the naira could push an additional 30 million Nigerians below the national poverty line by 2025. The report, titled 2025 Nigerian Budget and Economy Outlook, released on the official website of PwC, www.pwc.com, emphasized the worsening economic woes facing Africa's largest economy. The national poverty line, as defined by the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS), represents the annual income threshold below which an individual is considered poor. The report showed that Nigeria's economic environment, characterized by growing inflation and the rising cost of living, is worsening poverty levels with far-reaching effects for the country's population. The PwC report predicted a major addition in the number of Nigerians living in poverty, building on the findings of the 2022 National Multidimensional Poverty Index (NPI). That report indicated that 133 million Nigerians, more than 60% of the population, are multidimensionally poor, lacking access to basic necessities such as healthcare, education, employment, and adequate living standards. The World Bank, in a subsequent 2024 update, projected that 129 million Nigerians live below the poverty line, reflecting a sharp increase from 40.1% of the population in 2018 to 56% by 2024. The ongoing economic stagnation, compounded by quick population growth, has worsened poverty levels. The sharp depreciation of gross domestic product (GDP) per capita, which dropped by 25.04% from $12,162.6 in 2022 to $1,621.1 in 2023, further underscores the falling purchasing power and deteriorating living standards, according to PwC report. Inflation has been a major driver of Nigeria's economic crunch. By December 2024, the inflation rate rose to 34.8%, majorly eroding consumers' purchasing power and making it progressively hard for Nigerians to afford essentials such as food, housing, and healthcare. Between January and September 2024, food and transport inflation recorded the highest additions, with food inflation alone accounting for 34% of the month-on-month rise. Rising petroleum prices further contributed to escalating transportation costs. The increase in food prices has led to extreme food insecurity, with 25.1 million Nigerians acutely affected in 2024. The PwC report warned that these figures could rise to 33.1 million in 2025 if inflation persists, coupled with ongoing violence in northern food-producing regions. While the Nigerian government has implemented strategies such as a minimum wage surge, only 4.1% of the working population has benefited, limiting its overall effect. The report also highlighted gaps in the country's social safety net, such as conditional cash transfers to most vulnerable households. These programs remain underfunded and poorly targeted, with limited authentication through national identification numbers (NINs) or bank verification numbers (BVN). Talking insecurity, Kaduna government justifies talks with bandits. Obasani, Kaduna State Governor, has explained the reason behind the state government decision to deliberate with bandits, saying it is better than losing lives. Only the victims' families will understand and appreciate why the government made such a drastic decision, according to the governor. In an interview, Sani explained why his administration opted for a peace deal with the bandits unleashing terror in some parts of the state. According to a report from Kaduna State, bandits have continued to attack some communities, particularly in Chikun, Kagaruku, Giwa, Kajuru, and Birnin Gwari local government areas of the state, in addition to the attacks on travelers in major highways, which resulted in the loss of numerous lives and properties. The governor added that following the police, he met with major stakeholders, including the National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu, before finally deciding to initiate the peace deal. He further explained that the decision came after the bandits released 200 persons abducted in Giwa and Birnin Gwari local government areas of the states. The Kaduna governor expressed optimism that the deal will restore peace to the state and enable farmers to return to their farms and businesses to bounce back. Meanwhile, the Northern Apex Socio-Cultural Organization Arewa Consultative Forum ACF has declared its total support for the governor over Sani's peace deal with bandits terrorizing Kaduna State and its environs. And finally, on the news, Afenifere can others reject Sharia proposal in Southwest. On Monday, Christian and Muslim leaders clashed over the planned inauguration of Sharia arbitration panel across the southwestern states of Ogun, Osun, Ondo, Ekiti, Oyo, and Lagos states by the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs. This comes as the proponents of the Islamic Code said there was no going back on the decision to set up the panel to adjudicate and resolve issues among the Southwest Muslim Ummah. Dr. Hamid Bakri, the President, Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs in Ekiti State, and the Chairman of the Sharia Committee of Oyo Land, Dr. Rafiu Bello, said according to reports on Monday that the Sharia panel will be inaugurated despite the opposition to it. The Sharia Council had moved to create an arbitration panel in Oyo town to educate and sit on matters connected to Muslims. However, the development was opposed by the government and other leaders. Following this, the planned panel inauguration billed to hold at the Muslim Community Islamic Center in Mobo Laje area, Oyo, on January 11th was halted indefinitely. The panel last week held its maiden sitting at the Ekiti Central Mosque, Ado Ekiti, with 3 Qadis forming the panel. The Qadis include Imam Abdullahi Abdul Mutulib, Imam Abdurrahim Junaid Bamigbola, and Dr. Ibrahim Aminullahi Ogunride. The State Commissioner for Justice and Attorney General Dayo Akpata San, apparently uncomfortable with the idea, said the existing legal structure in the state did not recognize the Sharia court or arbitration panel. Aligning with the state government stance, the Ewi of Ado Ekiti Oba Adeyomo Adejugbe ordered the dissolution of the Sharia panel in the interest of peaceful coexistence and law and order in the community. Adejugbo spoke in Ado Ekiti on Saturday during a meeting he held with the chiefs and indigenes of the community and the chief imam and president of the League of Imams and Alphas in the Southwest, Edo and Delta states, Sheikh Jamiu Kuwulere, and other Muslim leaders in Ado Ekiti over the Sharia panel issue. Let's look at the top stories again. Trump announces 4 executive orders, including Iron Dome. Trump dismisses federal prosecutors probing his conduct. Switzerland deports Palestinian American journalist Abu Nima. HRW says pregnant women, babies in Gaza face grave risks, and Afghan food crisis worsens as aid cuts limit meals. That's all in the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.